Howdy, it's Jimmerado, and I am showing you some video we made recently, actually over 4th of July weekend, driving mostly around the Dover, New Philadelphia area of Ohio. And actually here we're driving, we're in the Walnut Creek, Sugar Creek area, which is where we were staying on this trip, and we're driving towards the Dover, New Philly area. I actually made a whole lot of videos while we were there because I have a lot of time on my hands thanks to the pandemic 2020 and all this good stuff. Still working, but just not getting out as much in the evenings as I used to, so I've got time to make these videos. I hope you don't mind. If you do, if you don't care for them, well then you can watch something else. But if you do, I hope you enjoy them. I know I like driving around places and just looking out the windshield and seeing what I can see. If I've posted any of my other videos yet from this trip, I'm gonna apologize again. We ran into a swarm of bugs at some point on this trip, and we just could not get the windshield cleaned off the way we would have liked to have. Yeah, there's a little bit of, you'll see a speck or two here and there. We tried to tilt the camera to where that sort of thing wasn't noticeable, but we couldn't help it. Anyway, I know if you're driving around in the country like we do, it's just something you kind of ignore. You ignore the little spots on the windshield and enjoy the ride. We were staying in Walnut Creek on this trip. I'll either put some more videos up of Walnut Creek and Sugar Creek, or I may have already. I videotaped a lot, or I always say videotaped, I recorded a lot, just because there's a lot to record out here. This is a really scenic area, and I have loved this area and spent a lot of time in this area since the late 90s, actually. My wife grew up some in this area, and when we were going to college and then, dating, and then after we got married, we would come and see her mom and dad, and her grandparents lived up in this area, and we just spent a lot of time up here. Right after college, I've said before, we went to Berea College here in Kentucky, and after we graduated, we moved to Cleveland and spent 10 years of our life in Cleveland, and that's a story for another day. I've got lots of good Cleveland stories. I did social work in Cleveland for a decade. Yeah, again, that's a story for another day, but we spent a lot of time here going to see her family and just hanging out. And her mom lived in this little area for quite a while. This is just a nice little community, and they've got a lot going on. A couple of things one thing I want to mention concerning the town of Dover, and Dover and New Philadelphia are just about the same city in my books. I don't know where one stops and where the other one starts, but they're both separate cities, but they're very similar. And I picked up a book recently. Actually, on this trip, I picked it up at the Buellers, which we're going to pass here in a little bit. It's called Legendary Locals of Dover, Ohio, by Matthew S. Lotzenheiser. Always like to mention a book when I can, and I picked this book up. It's just about every page, it's about 125 pages long, and every page mentions one of the legendary locals of the town. Not a whole lot of international celebrities, not a lot of household names, but I'm sure the people of Dover are proud of their their sports teams, politicians, people that founded the city. And it's interesting reading about them, especially not being from that area. As I read the book, though, I realized there are a couple of the locals that I've rubbed elbows with. And I wanted to mention, and I think we just passed his funeral home a little bit ago, John Herzig. And he has the Toland Herzig Funeral Home. And actually several of my wife's relatives. I've been to that funeral home many times. Unfortunately, it's always sad when somebody passes away, but we've been there on a number of occasions, and John actually runs, I believe it's called the Famous Endings Museum. And John has actually given me a little personal tour of that museum too, which is quite a treat. John collects funeral memorabilia, mostly memorabilia from celebrity funerals. And I remember he has a contract signed by Elvis, and I believe it's from where Elvis bought his mom's burial plot. He had a novelty given out at James Doohan's funeral. James Doohan, Scotty from Star Trek. I was impressed with that. There was a piece from the Abraham Lincoln funeral train, and that to me is that's kind of a holy grail piece. Actually, any of those things I mentioned are kind of holy grail pieces, among other things. But I know before one of my wife's family members' funerals, I was asking him about his collection, and he just took me back and showed it to me. Well, that's now a museum that they're advertising. I saw a mention of it on a local flyer. But that's a free museum that is open during business hours. And how awesome is that? And John, you would think John might be kind of a, maybe a bit of a morbid kind of guy, but he's not. He's a warm, friendly guy. And they have always given our family great service when we've had to work with them. They're very sweet, trustable people. I admire them. And I think it's kind of, I kind of, my interests kind of tilt towards the macabre sometimes. And that's an interesting funeral. And, that should be on a lot of radars. That's something that all road trippers should hit at some point. This is the Buellers that we often go to. In fact, when my wife and I are in town, we go and visit her dad's gravesite. And we stop by this Buellers and buy flowers. They always have a friendly staff. And this is a good, clean store. Very nice for this little local community. And we like this place a lot. And oddly, I enjoy going into this grocery store. There's a restaurant in there too, and we used to go in there with my wife's family, and we would have, we'd meet them for a family lunch or a family dinner, and it's a nice restaurant. I'm not sure if it's open right now or not, though. Yeah, and this might be a good omen, might not be. Look at that turkey vulture guy out there. He was near the cemetery while we were there. Yes. Speaking of the funeral museum and cemeteries, here's a turkey vulture. But he's actually awesome, and I'm really glad I videotaped him because he is just that cool. And I have not gotten that kind of footage of a critter like that since I've been videotaping stuff, and I just felt kind of privileged that we got to see him. So yeah, enjoy that turkey vulture footage. He's going to take off here in a little bit. Yeah, but the Buellers back there is just a really nice little grocery store. Very community-minded. There's an Ace Hardware. There's a flower shop in it. It's just a really, really nice grocery store. And like I said, they have a local book section. And I love bookstores that have local book sections, and I really love grocery stores that have a local book section. I think that's great. Somebody else that's mentioned in the Legendary Locals of Dover book is Ernest Warther, and he's not with us anymore, but he is a fella who used to carve trains, and he did an amazing job of carving detailed, authentic replicas of trains, and there's a whole museum devoted to him now. We went there several years ago. And it's just, it's something to see. I know he had a replica, again, of the Lincoln funeral train, and I thought that was pretty cool. There's also a button museum in there. It's, I guess people are into buttons. But it's a cool museum, and it's definitely unique. Except, the only thing not unique about it is his grandson, David Warther II. And I'm looking at a brochure on his museum. The David Warther Carvings Museum is a 5th generation carver, and he carves out of ivory scale ships. And that his museum is actually in Sugar Creek, so I probably should talk more about that on the Sugar Creek video I make. But oh yeah, and here we're driving through downtown, and I just think this is a very attractive downtown area. We're going to meet some of my wife's family at a park for a little picnic. And just to say howdy, we wanted to meet with them. They're very into social distancing at the moment. They didn't want to meet at a restaurant, which I totally understand, and we met them at a park and just sat in fold-out chairs. But we're driving through downtown right now, and I think this is just a really attractive downtown. They're having a little carnival up here on the right, or some sort of little festival. Yeah, but David Warther, we went to his museum in Sugar Creek probably a couple of years ago, and we got there right when it opened, and David himself was there opening the place up. And he gave us a personal tour telling us all about his about the boats that he carves. And we were there. We were probably there a couple of hours, and I really, really enjoyed that. He was talking about making the oars and the masts and the very tiny details. I like to paint toy soldiers, and I've done some resin casting. If I needed oars for a project, 20 or 30 oars, I would make a resin cast and just make copies of them. But he actually carves out each one individually. Oh, right there on the right is a really nice Union Civil War monument on right there by the I believe that's their courthouse there in downtown. I think that's really nice. Yeah, but David Warther, he has his own separate museum I don't even think it's affiliated with his grandfather's. And I think there might even be a little bit of I think they're total. I don't know who owns his grandfather's trains, but I think there's a pretty solid separation between the two museums. But David encouraged us to still check out the other museum too. He's still proud of his grandfather's legacy and what what they've done as the Warthers, and just a nice guy. I thought it was really awesome that here's David Warther at the Warther Museum giving us a personal tour and talking about the ships he sculpts. I guess you kind of whittle those down. I mean, that's a lot of work when you think about carving into ivory. And he doesn't miss a beat. And he was telling me about how hard it is sometimes to get blueprints, because he goes off the blueprints. So that's some crazy detail there. And again, as someone who paints soldiers, I was just really impressed with it. I go out and buy plastic soldiers or resin or metal soldiers, and I paint them. Somebody else is sculpting them. I'm kind of doing the easy part of that, but I think it's relaxing. Sculpting scale ships like that is it's just a whole nother level of artistry, and I was really impressed with it. So yeah, anyway, the Legendary Locals of Dover, that's a cool book that I picked up, and I think it's really neat. Yeah, and we're driving through this park down here. I forget the name of the park. I know there's a really cool football stadium down here that I just thought looked really nice. And we're driving down to meet, actually, my wife's technically cousins. Personally, my wife's family is from this area, and I just really like this area. I like the people. We have, that whole family connection down here. Small town America. I know I've walked into the Arby's and just had nice conversations with people in this area. Just a cool area, and we're just driving through the parking lot here. Oh, and while we were here, I wanted to mention too, we stopped by the mall, the local mall, the Newtown Mall in New Philadelphia. And my wife said she used to spend a lot of time there growing up, hanging out with her friends, as all of us did, at our local malls. And we went there this time. I've always liked that mall. They used to have a really nice theater. I think they had a decent bookstore at one time. It was a nice mall, but it's starting to kind of get that, I don't want to call any mall a dead mall, but it's getting that kind of look to it. And it's, just not quite what it used to be. And that was kind of sad, but they're still kicking. They're still trying. And to their credit, they still have a few of the bigger stores and all that. But still, we went out there, and it it's a mall, and it's in that area. But malls are just not what they used to be, obviously. It was nice to see all these American flags out, and we saw this a lot in this part of Ohio. Lots and lots of American flags, which was great. And there's my wife's cousin and his wife. And they actually come to Kentucky a lot. They like the lake down here. We bump into them several times a year, and it's just great seeing them. But we came out here and just sat with them for a little bit. We were actually here for about 3 hours. But this is a nice little park. You saw a lot of people just out here having a good old time. Something else I noticed, and I don't think I've noticed it before, are these squirrels, these black squirrels. And I'm not sure what the story is on them, but man, they are just jet black, some of them. And it was cool checking them out. I know my dad and I went to a town called Olney, Illinois, several years ago, and they have a huge albino squirrel population. And I got a lot of good pictures of those squirrels. I wish I had my video camera back then, but I didn't. I might have to go visit there again sometime, but it was a real treat checking these little guys out. They kind of blend in with the tree there, but they looked really unique. You know, and along with the turkey vultures, I just thought it was really cool that we got some video of these guys. Yeah, but he's just hanging around. I know I filmed some other squirrels, and I wanted to include them on here too because I liked them so much. Yeah, but he's just kind of hanging around. Yeah, this guy's, he's up in a tree. He was just basically posing for me as far as I could tell. Just hanging out there. But yeah, they had these great little black squirrels everywhere. I have a little chihuahua that's kind of jet black mostly, and she kind of looks like these squirrels. Kind of reminded me of them some. Yeah, it's dark again, but we're kind of driving back out of town. Again, they had that little festival going on in downtown, and I thought it was kind of pretty as we drove through there. Again, just a really attractive little downtown area. And I mentioned before too, when we lived in Cleveland, we would come down to this area just to get out of the city. There was a little coffee shop downtown. There was a little sandwich shop I liked. Oh, Grinders. There's a sandwich shop called Grinders in town that we always liked a lot, and I believe that's still there. But yeah, look at the church there. Or no, is that a church? Oh yeah, no, we're looking at. Yeah, you got some little painting on the side of the building there. Again, American flags. This is just a nice, calm downtown area. Yeah, and my wife's dad, he was a Methodist minister. He actually worked on the railroad for years and then decided to become a minister. Took a huge pay cut, unlike some of the ministers you see these days. But he went into kind of the rural church business and again took a pay cut, but he loved doing that. Kind of did that sort of thing up until the end for him, and he really enjoyed it. But this was an area he liked a whole lot too. And then my wife's grandparents kind of zigzagged. They were doing the Florida-Ohio thing quite a bit, spending their winters in Florida, which is a good idea when you live in Ohio. But they spent their last few years in this area too, and it was just really nice. Yeah, but especially around Cleveland. Yeah, there's that little. I think they've got some food trucks over there, kind of lit up there on the left. Yeah, but when you live in especially northern Ohio, the winters can be really rough, and we lived right on the lake up in Cleveland, and we gave our snowblower away when we moved to Kentucky. You need your snowblower in a town like Cleveland, but in Kentucky you just, you have a shovel, and maybe once a year I have to go out and shovel. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I just there's just a little video of us driving mostly through the Dover, New Philly, Ohio area, and I thought it was kind of nice, so I thought I would put it up, and I hope you've liked it. Check out my blog, KentuckyTravels.blogspot.com. Thanks a lot.